Many of our state and county roads are unpaved aggregate surfaces, and because they are usually low-volume roads, the cost of paving probably exceeds any benefits that would be gained through an expensive paving operation. But many rural residents rely on these roads for access to work, school, and market. The roads may be unpaved, but they are not unimportant. Maintaining the hundreds of miles of our unpaved roads requires an almost constant effort. The fact is, in time, weather and traffic will make any unpaved road virtually impassable if it's not maintained regularly and correctly. The motor grader is a machine especially suited for this type of road maintenance. With its long wheelbase and its adjustable blade, the grader can easily span badly eroded sections and quickly restore the surface to its original shape. But of course, it's the grader operator who really gets the job done. He's the one who is responsible for keeping his stretch of road in good condition. This program, Blading Unpaved Roads, will demonstrate the basics of the operation. And it's going to be basic. There are just too many different circumstances and situations to cover every detail here. So let me make one suggestion. Read this book, Blading Aggregate Surfaces. It was put together by a panel of highway engineers, and it describes and explains nearly all aspects of this operation. Read it and carry it along with you out on the job. Okay, let's get started. The first part of the operation begins in the yard, checking out the grader. Make sure it's in good shape, properly serviced, and equipped to do the job. That means checking your fluid levels, air filters, belts, hoses, wiring, and so on. If you find something wrong, either fix it yourself or let your supervisor know about it. Then there's lubrication. The grader often works in extremely dusty conditions, and that can be murder on moving parts. Refer to the operator's manual to find the location of the grease fittings and how often they should be serviced. Check your tires. Note any wheel lean in the rear tandem tires. You could have a bad axle bearing. Make sure the tires are inflated properly and that the tread and sidewalls are in good shape. Check for loose or broken lug nuts. Take a look at the mold board and blade. Check for any major cracks or bends. Replace worn blades before they damage the mold board. Make sure you use all the necessary safety equipment. Flags on the mold board are required in some areas, while the slow-moving vehicle emblem is nearly a universal requirement. When you start the grader, check all of your lights. You'll often work in isolated areas, and your lights may be the only traffic warning devices available to you. If the grader checks out, you're ready to go. But before I begin describing the operation, let's take a look at what you're trying to accomplish. Unpaved roads are generally made up of various aggregates. Stone, sand, and gravel are the most common. Smaller particles called fines are added to the aggregates and bind them together, much like cement. When they are properly mixed and compacted, the aggregates and fines form a hard crust on the wearing surface of the road. But in time, the aggregates tend to drift to the shoulder of the road, and the fines are blown away. Mainly, your job is to recover the aggregates and distribute them back across the road while maintaining the original crown and shape of the road. And you want to avoid breaking the crust. You do this by dragging or smoothing the surface with the blade of the motor grader. But traffic and weather will eventually break down the crust, leaving potholes or the washboards you see here. Then cutting or reshaping the road becomes necessary. As I said earlier, there are many circumstances that will dictate how you approach a particular job or a particular pass. So if this operation is new to you, check the job out with your supervisor. Decide what needs to be done before you begin working on the road. In any grading operation, getting the right blade setting for the job is the most critical factor for success. And it's no different for blading unpaved roads. On the first pass, you need to set the blade angle to pull material from the shoulder and toward the center of the road. 30 to 45 degrees works best. Set the height of both ends of the blade to match the shape of the road. That prevents cutting off the crown. And tilt the moldboard forward to get a dragging rather than a cutting action. The material will be carried from the shoulder up the slope and form a windrow near the center of the road. Make sure there is no material spilling off the toe of the blade. That'll leave a small windrow at the shoulder and prevent water from draining off the road. You could end up with a secondary ditch. A secondary ditch forms when water can't drain off the road. It runs along the shoulder line, eroding the surface. To correct the problem, you may have to haul in new material or fill the ditch with material pulled from the shoulder, as this operator is doing. The point is this: you can't eliminate secondary ditches altogether, but by maintaining the shoulder line properly as you blade the road, you can hold them to a minimum. After you complete your first pass, you'll need to make additional passes to spread the material across to the other side of the road. The width and condition of the road will determine the number of passes. But keep these things in mind on each pass you make. Set the height of both ends of the blade to match the shape of the road. If you cut or flatten the crown, water will get trapped there. It won't drain off to the shoulder. And don't put too much downward pressure on the blade. Remember, you just want to smooth the road, not cut into it. Take care not to break up the crust. And finally, go slow. 4 to 5 miles an hour is best. If you go too fast, the grader will bounce, and any up and down movement of the blade will make your work uneven. As you carry the windrow to the other shoulder, you'll need to provide a means for water to drain off the road. You do this by cutting weep holes in the windrow. Here's how you do it. Every 100 feet or so, straighten out the blade so it spreads rather than windrows the material. That makes a gap in the windrow and will allow water to drain off the roadway and shoulder. If you don't cut a weep hole now and then, water will run along the windrow and form a secondary ditch along the shoulder. Continue blading the road until you get the entire windrow to the other side. The next time you maintain the road, you'll follow the same procedures to carry the windrow back across to the other side. Sometimes, depending on the road and its condition, you can maintain the road adequately by using the blade in combination with a drag attachment mounted on the rear of the grader. The blade recovers the aggregate at the side of the road and windrows it to the center. Then the drag picks up the windrow and feathers it back across the road. You'll make fewer passes using a drag, but its use is limited to certain types of soil and road conditions. But remember, whether you use a drag or not, you're basically concerned with recovering loose aggregate, smoothing the road, and maintaining the crown and slope of the road. And you want to be careful not to break the crust. You accomplish this by dragging the road, not cutting it. But as we saw earlier, the crust will eventually break down, forming potholes and washboards, and creating a rough riding surface. When this happens, the blading operation calls for reshaping the road. Reshaping should be done when the road is wet. Trying to reshape a dry, hard road will quickly wear down the blades on the moldboard. If the aggregate is moist, it will be easier to cut and mix, and a good mix is necessary for the formation of the crust. To reshape the surface, keep enough downward pressure on the blade so it digs to the bottom of the potholes or washboards in the road. Angle the blade the same way as you saw earlier, 30 to 45 degrees, to carry the material toward the center of the road. When the cutting is completed, spread the material back across the road to restore the original crown and slope. Dry weather and compaction from traffic will soon reform the crust. There are many special situations that will affect how you carry out the maintenance of unpaved roads. Grading near bridges, on super elevations, or on hills are just a few of them. Again, refer to the booklet on blading aggregate surfaces for the details of the operation. For now, I'll cover 4 common areas: intersections, railroad crossings, driveways, and bridges. First, intersections. When an unpaved road meets a paved road, you want to gradually eliminate the crown of the unpaved road. So when you get to within 50 to 100 feet of the intersection, gradually straighten out the moldboard and apply equal downward pressure to both ends of the blade to flatten off the crown. Be careful not to blade the loose material onto the roadway. Raise the moldboard, again keeping it straight, and lower it on the other side of the material until it just barely touches the ground. Then shift into reverse and back drag the material so that it spreads evenly on that half of the road. Check to see if another pass is needed to eliminate the crown. If not, cross the road and continue the operation on that side. First eliminating the crown for 50 to 100 feet, then back to normal blading. If you use a drag on your grader, the procedure is about the same. Straighten the blade, eliminate the crown, then raise the blade as you get close to the edge of the pavement. The only difference is that you probably won't have to back drag the material. The drag will spread it out for you. Remember to always lift the blade and the drag as you cross the paved road. At intersections of unpaved roads with no stop signs, you want to eliminate the crown on both roads so the intersection itself is flat. Again, straighten the blade and put equal downward pressure on both ends of the blade to eliminate any crown in the intersection. Back drag all approaches to the intersection to spread the material evenly. And make sure the shoulders have a slope at the point in which the roads intersect. Now, blading railroad crossings. Treat them the same way as an intersection. Blade away any crown in the road, starting about 50 to 100 feet away from the crossing. Be careful not to blade any aggregate onto the tracks. Lift the blade over the pile and back drag it, using a straight blade and putting enough downward pressure to pull back all of the aggregate. And of course, you should maintain both sides of the crossing. To finish the job, it's often necessary to use your shovel. Remove any loose stones on or between the tracks and fill in low spots with your shovel. Here are some points to remember when you're blading near driveways. First, the roadway has preference. You have to maintain areas around driveways according to the needs of the road. But leaving a drop or bump at the end of the driveway is bad public relations. In this particular case, the grader has left a small drop at the end of the driveway. To eliminate that drop, pull into the driveway at a sharp angle and lower the blade to cut off the drop. Then back out and approach the driveway from the other side. You end up with a Y pattern, cutting off both corners of the driveway to bring it to the same grade as the road. On your last pass, come straight into the driveway with the blade down low and straight to spread the loose material evenly. Then back out and continue blading the road. Remember, you can't maintain every driveway every day. You'll have to decide which ones need attention now and which ones can be taken care of later. The last operation we'll look at is blading the approach to a bridge. The thing to remember here is the approach has to fit the shape of the bridge deck. If the deck is crowned, the approach should be crowned. If the deck is flat, the approach should be flat. Besides shaping the road to fit the deck, blading should also leave the road at the same height as the bridge. Here, for example, the operator will have to bring up material to fill in the drop at the end of the bridge. This bridge has the opposite problem. Instead of a drop, it has a buildup of material deposited on one end of the deck. As you'll see, both conditions can be corrected using the same procedure. In this case, the approach leads up to a flat timber deck. To match the shape of the deck, the operator begins flattening out the approach while he's still between 50 to 100 feet away from the end of the bridge. That'll leave him with a smooth transition from the road to the deck. Carry the material right up to the end of the bridge. That'll fill in any low spots like the one we saw earlier. But be careful not to blade the loose aggregate onto the deck itself. Now, just as we saw in the earlier operations, you use the blade to back drag the material. Raise the blade high enough to clear the pile and drive ahead a few feet. Lower the blade on the other side of the pile and put enough downward pressure on it to pull back any loose aggregate and to scrape off any buildup of material that had collected at the end of the deck. Be careful not to put too much pressure on the blade, especially when you're working on a wooden deck. If you put too much pressure on the blade, it could cut off the heads of the nails used in the timber flooring. You or the next person to use the bridge could end up with a couple of flat tires. Most likely, it'll take more than one pass to blade the approach, but the extra passes will be basically the same. Shape the road to fit the deck, starting about 50 to 100 feet away from the bridge. Pull the material right up to the end of the bridge to fill in low spots. Then set the blade down and back drag the material to scrape off any excess and to level off the bridge approach. These basic steps, along with attention to drainage details, will produce a smooth approach and transitions from road to bridge. One more point about grading near bridges. Don't be the one to test the accuracy of the posted load limits. When the bridge can't support the weight of the grader, find another way across. Leave the load testing to the engineers. You know, all the operations we've looked at here have one thing in common. Talking about them is far easier than actually doing it. Blading an unpaved road properly is a job that takes practice to learn. But you can get a lot of satisfaction from knowing that your roads remain in a good, safe condition through all kinds of weather. The kind of satisfaction that makes your job worth the effort.